The Qidi X Plus 4 is a fully enclosed high-temperature Core XY 3D printer that, with an $800 price tag, seems like a great deal. However, the story isn't quite that simple. In this video, I'll tell you what I and others have found after months of testing, and I'll get you up to speed on all of the controversy that has caused many to bypass this seemingly great 3D printer. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. Before we go any further, I should say that Qidi sent me this 3D printer for review. I didn't buy it, but they have no say in what does or doesn't go into any of my videos. If you decide you want to buy the X Plus 4 after watching my video, then check out the links in the description below for the best deals. So first, let's skip ahead a little and jump straight into the controversy surrounding this 3D printer. The first thing to say is that the issue I'm going to tell you about now is solved, and Qidi have assured me that any new X Plus 4 printer that is sold after this video is published has updated components to fix this particular issue. The only reason I'm going to tell you about it is that I think it tells us something about Qidi, the manufacturer of this machine. If you want to know all of the details, then go and watch this video where I explain everything fully. To briefly explain, if you just want the highlights, Qidi made a mistake with one electrical component that went into all of the original X Plus 4s, but only caused an issue in certain locations. The reason why it only affects machines in certain locations is because different electrical voltages are used in different parts of the world. In lower mains voltage countries like those in the Americas, this one electrical component that controls the power supply to the X Plus 4's chamber heater could overheat. As far as we know, nothing more than part failure and some concerning smoke resulted from this part failure, but it was obviously less than ideal. The end result was that Qidi supplied replacement upgraded parts to all affected owners for them to change themselves. There was also a period of time where new machines were shipped with the original part fitted, but with upgraded parts supplied for the user to change. As the replacement of this part involved working with mains voltages, I personally wasn't comfortable with putting out a video that may result in someone buying this printer and then having to mess with potentially dangerous components. I therefore told Qidi that I wouldn't be putting out a video until all the new machines going to lower voltage countries would be supplied with the new part. Phew. So Qidi have assured me that that is now the case, so we can put all of that behind us and concentrate on reviewing this printer. Like most of the enclosed printers you can buy now, the X Plus 4 is almost ready to go out of the box. All you need to do after removing the outer packaging materials is attach a door handle and the touchscreen display, which are left unattached so they don't get damaged during shipping. Once this is done, you can plug it in and turn it on. There is then a short series of steps that you're guided through to remove a few cable ties and screws that are there to keep the internal components from moving around during shipping. After this, it's time to load some filament, which also means attaching the spool holder, which now goes on the top. Where to put the spool holder on a 3D printer is a difficult decision, as the right place for one person will be wrong for someone else, but most would agree that on the back of the machine is rarely the best option, especially on such a big, heavy machine. The X Plus 4 weighs 27 kilos and is a two-person lift, so spinning it around every time you want to change filament wouldn't be fun. Personally, I find the top location to be fine, and if you don't like it, it is very easy to attach a PTFE tube to the filament inlet and print from a separate spool holder, dry box, or filament dryer if you like. I was a little disappointed that Qidi's own filament dry box that was supplied with my X Plus 3 didn't fit, as it would have been a perfect place for it to sit. Actually, loading filament is very simple though, and again, you're guided through the process on the display so that you know when to feed the filament in. Once your filament is loaded, you're then told that the tutorial is complete, but then that you need to perform leveling and resonance compensation before printing. It's a shame this wasn't just included in the tutorial, as new users aren't going to know what those things are or even where to find them. Both features are in the calibration menu, and once you find them, you are again guided through the process. But I can't help but think that some people will find this a bit confusing. Most of the calibration processes are fully automated, and if the printer needs your input, then it tells you. However, it's not clear which you have to do initially, so I just did all of them to be sure. Platform calibration makes sure your print surface is level side to side. The X Plus 4 has two stepper motors, with one controlling each side of the bed, so if they were to go out of sync, then there's a chance that your bed wouldn't be level. I ran the platform calibration once at the beginning, and then again after I updated the firmware, and then haven't felt the need to do it again since. Resonance compensation is automated, but noisy. Bed leveling is a little more involved, but with the very minor amount I actually had to do to adjust things, I don't actually think it was needed. The printer checks out how level the bed is before each print and compensates anyway, so you shouldn't have any problems even if it is a little bit out. Also, the way the X Plus 4 senses the bed is a bit confusing too, as just like Bambu Lab machines, it has load sensors in the bed, but it also has an inductive sensor too. Whatever combination of these sensors they're using to set a bed mesh and Z offset, it works, and out of all of the 3D printers I've owned and tested, nothing matches the first layer consistency of the X Plus 4 other than my Bambu Lab machines. That's quite a quick statement to say, and it doesn't really explain how important this feature is. Personally, I found that the biggest complaints with 3D printers over the past 4.5 years of putting out content on my YouTube channel are all to do with the print's first layers. If the first layer isn't right, then it doesn't matter how good any of the other features are, your print will fail. Also, it's no good being able to start a print remotely if you don't trust that the printer is going to consistently produce an accurate first layer, and then you need to check it every time just to make sure. The X Plus 4, in my experience, does this part right. Now, you may have heard of PCBWay, our video sponsor, but do you actually know what they do? PCBWay offer a full PCB or printed circuit board manufacturing service, whether you're looking for 1 or 100,000 items, but they also offer a lot of other services too. PCBWay now offer 3D printing, CNC machining, injection molding, plus many more options to help you get that project finished. Check out their website from the link in the description for an instant quick quote and $5 off your first order. Now back to the X Plus 4. So, after a little bit of setup, I was ready to print. I started, as always, with a pre-sliced model off of the supplied USB stick. This PLA Benchy printed well in around 16 minutes, and apart from some minor stringing, the quality is very good. You'll obviously want to print more than what's just on the USB stick though, so in order to send prints remotely and communicate with the X Plus 4, I entered my Wi-Fi details and once connected, took note of the IP address. As Qidi use Clipper firmware with their own user interface for the screen, you can access the printer from any device on the same network just by typing the IP address into any web browser. From Clipper's fluid interface, you can then access everything the printer has sensors for and change any configuration you like without having to sign up to any cloud services or even connecting to the internet at all if you don't want to. I'm a big fan of Clipper firmware, and Qidi seems to have done the bare minimum to change the firmware for their own needs. This means that for anyone familiar with Clipper, it's easy to jump straight in with a familiar interface. The X Plus 4 also comes with a good quality camera and an internal light, so monitoring your print remotely is super simple. You're supplied with Qidi's Qidi Studio for slicing models ready for printing, which is actually just a reskinned Orca slicer. Orca Slicer is now the preferred slicing option for many, including me, and actually the latest versions of Orca Slicer now comes with profiles for the X Plus 4, so I just bypassed Qidi Studio and used Orca. One of the features of Orca Slicer is that you can control Clipper machines from inside the slicing software just by entering the IP address, and all this works faultlessly with this Qidi machine. It was at this point that Qidi emailed me to let me know that there was new software available and advised me to update. The firmware version my machine was supplied with meant that an online firmware update failed, but all I had to do was download it from their website, put it on the USB stick and tell the machine to update offline. This worked fine, and after rechecking some earlier calibrations on the machine, I ran through a couple of calibration prints in Orca to see what the X Plus 4 was capable of. One of the main things I wanted to check out early on was how the X Plus 4 coped with VFAs, or vertical fine artifacts. Qidi had told me that they were particularly pleased with how they had improved print quality in this area, and said that the improvements were down to their choice to use wider belts for the drive motion of the X and Y axes, and I have to say, I was very impressed with what I saw here. There are next to no signs of VFAs on the test print designed to highlight flaws in this area, so it seems that the wider belts did indeed do what they were intended to. One of the key features of enclosed printers like the X Plus 4 is that they prevent cool air and drafts getting to your print. This is great for filaments that need a warmer printing environment, but PLA actually needs a cooler environment, so you're advised to keep the door open and remove the top panel while printing with PLA. Removing the top panel is easy, but leaving the door open isn't ideal as it sticks out quite a long way. My next prints were some small flexible toys for my son to give away to some friends, but unfortunately they failed with what appeared to be a nozzle clog. To try and work out what had happened, I removed the hot end, and sure enough, the filament in there had melted and expanded before reaching the hot part, which caused the clog. This very much looked to be caused by heat creep and surprised me a bit. Heat creep was an issue we used to see quite a lot a few years ago when we got rid of the PTFE lined hot ends so that the temperatures could go up but didn't improve the hot end cooling enough. I gave the X Plus 4 another chance, but sure enough the same print failed again with another clog. I emailed Qidi to tell them what I'd found, and it turns out I wasn't the only one getting clogs. The early machines, including mine, were apparently supplied with stainless steel hot ends. These were causing clogs, so Qidi were replacing them with ceramic lined ones and said that they would send me one. While I was waiting, I decided to have a poke around now that I already had the print head partially disassembled. I removed and pulled apart the extruder mechanism to see what was inside, and whilst many of the parts are plastic, the bits that count are metal. I was quite pleased with what I found here, and I'd be surprised to find any problems with wear on these components for a long time to come. When the hot end arrived, it was clear to see the difference, as some of the white ceramic lining is visible. I believe that Qidi will replace any of the stainless hot ends with ceramic ones if asked, but that new machines have the mod now anyway. Once I swapped the hot end, my clog issues went away, and during the cooler days, even printed PLA with the door closed and just the lid off with no problems. Once PLA was printing well, I rattled through a few prints that I needed, including this compliant mechanism handbrake mod for my sim rig, which worked really well. There are a lot of 3D printers that can print PLA well though, and where the Qidi machine should really come into its own is with stronger, higher temperature and more difficult to print materials. We were heading to London Comic Con and my son wanted some web shooters to go with his Miles Morales Spider-Man costume, so I designed and printed him some in Overture's PC material. These printed beautifully and feel way stronger than PLA ones would. Next up was some glass-filled ABS, which Qidi sent me. ABS is stronger than PLA generally speaking, and the added fibres really help making it even tougher. Unfortunately, ABS can be pretty temperamental to print, but this is where the X Plus 4 really shines. Like quite a few machines now, the X Plus 4 is enclosed, but what you also get here is a chamber heater. This heater draws in the air already in the enclosure, heats it, and then circulates it back into the enclosure until a requested temperature is reached. The electrical component issue we discussed at the start was part of the power supply for this chamber heater, but as I said, that's fixed now. My machine required no mods here, but that's because I live in the UK where we use 240 volt mains power, meaning the standard part was fine anyway. The chamber heater can heat the enclosure to up to 65 degrees C and works really well. It not only allows me to print stubborn materials, but I've found it great when I want to print something without heating my workshop. It's very often below 5 degrees here in the winter and my workshop is basically uninsulated, so printing on open printers like my Bambu Lab A1s can be a challenge, even with PLA sometimes. The Qidi machine just gets on with it and prints any material whenever I want, no matter what the temperature is outside. Since the nozzle clog, I've only had one print quality issue, which was on this Mando helmet, and this was entirely my own fault. The X Plus 4 has been so good that I've just got used to hitting print and walking away. Unfortunately, what I did here was print with PLA that I hadn't tried before and hadn't done any kind of test print with. If I'd paid more attention, then I would have realised that at the speeds I was trying to print at, this PLA needs a slightly higher nozzle temperature to melt the filament properly. I could have sorted this easily by just bumping up the nozzle temperature during the print, which is exactly what I did towards the end. Unfortunately, I started the print just before going to bed and didn't realise what was going on until the morning when it was nearly done. It turns out this one was too big anyway, so with me paying a little more attention, the reprint turned out much better and the correct size. What is important though is that the print volume on the Plus 4 is big enough to print full-size helmets in one piece, which is not the case with any of the other Core XY machines I've reviewed before. The print volume is 305 by 305 by 280 millimeters, which is a good chunk bigger than many of the competitors' model, apart from Creality's K2 Plus. When looking at the numbers on print volume, it's easy to get a bit lost on what you need. 256 cubed versus 220 cubed versus 305 by 305 by 280 all seem pretty similar on paper, but if you want to print full-size helmets, then you need something with a bed at least 300 by 300. And in that category, there aren't a lot of 3D printers, let alone Core XY enclosed machines. It was around this point in my testing that the chamber heater board issue was discovered, so I decided to investigate on my machine. Removing the rear panel is not something you should need to do on a printer like this usually, but a lot of the Plus 4 owners will have now had to do this, and I think Qidi may now wish they had spent a little more time tidying up their wiring. For a machine that produces a lot of vibrations when printing fast, I believe there should have been a lot more thought put into wire support and routing. There are a couple of wires that are at full stretch to reach the correct connectors, and it's a bit of a rat's nest in there. As someone who's built racing car and aeroplane wiring looms in the past, seeing this kind of messy wiring is painful to me. Unfortunately, there isn't enough slack provided to be able to improve things much either. It may sound like I'm being pedantic, but I also found a wire that was pinched in one of the cover fittings, which I'm sure would have eventually worn through if I hadn't moved it. The X Plus 4 has a lot of positive features, but cable management is not one of them. With the back of it off, it was also a lot easier to see the detail of the poop chute and nozzle cleaning assembly. In preparation for their soon-to-be-released Qidi Box multi-filament system, the X Plus 4 comes equipped with a mechanism that can purge and eject filament, as well as clean the nozzle. This is all necessary when you want to change filament while your model is printing, which you can't use yet, but when it finally arrives, it will be great to do things like print support interfaces in different materials. What it does mean for you now, though, is that you never really have to clean your nozzle anymore, which again is one less thing that could cause a print to fail, or at least give you less than ideal results. What I don't love about it is that all of the filament that's purged is fired out the back of the machine. All of the good thinking in placing the spool holder somewhere more accessible has been forgotten when designing the poop chute exit. As I said, turning this big heavy machine around is not easy, so the last thing you want to do is keep pulling it forwards to clean out little blobs of waste filament. People have already designed mods that direct the waste to the side to make it easier, but I can't see any real reason why this couldn't have been incorporated into the original design. At the moment, it's only a blob or two on each print, but when the Qidi box arrives, bringing the ability to change filament during the print, the mess will be 100 times worse. While we're on the subject of placing things on the outside, the power cord coming out of the right-hand side also seems like an odd choice. I'm sure it was the best choice for power supply placement, but with where everything else is placed, the only option you would have for pushing the printer up to a wall would have been on the right-hand side. With the power cord there, it leaves no option at all to save space. This is already a big 3D printer, but having to keep all the sides clear for some sort of access makes it feel even bigger. So those are all of my grumbles. Let's look at some of the many positive features. The X Plus 4's nozzle can reach 370 degrees and the bed can reach 120. This means that in combination with the enclosed build area and chamber heater, it's capable of printing with way stronger and way more heat resistant materials. One filament that I've never been able to print with before is Qidi's pps-cf. This is a carbon fibre infused polyphenylene sulfide. PPS is plastic, but it doesn't act like it. It's wear resistant, chemical resistant, heat resistant, strong, and it's a great electrical insulator. If your car engine has any plastic components where it looks like metal parts should be, there's a good chance it's PPS. Qidi's pps-cf has the carbon fibre added to increase the strength even further. The downside to PPS is that it needs nozzle temperatures of between 310 and 340 degrees, and it's expensive. I bought some to try out, and after a couple of small calibration prints to check the profile and a PLA test print to check the dimensions, I printed a new handle for this pizza paddle as the old one had clearly not survived well. Now, this particular print uses £7.24 worth of filament, which is about $18, so you're going to want to make sure you don't waste any. Being able to print this kind of thing at home is going to be a game changer when it comes to the kind of projects I can take on for customers, and I'm already thinking about the conversations I've had in the past where I've had to turn down jobs because the materials just weren't up to what they wanted from them. Being able to print with these tougher materials has opened up a whole lot of new possibilities for jobs that I can now take on. What I'm basically saying is, if you want a 3D printer that can earn you money, you could do a lot worse than the Qidi X Plus 4. It kind of goes without saying that the Plus 4 can print with all of the other less expensive, more industrial filaments like nylon, polycarbonate and ABS, with its ability to reach and maintain higher temperatures. It's also able to print abrasive filaments like anything infused with fibres because of its hardened nozzle. This printer also has good part cooling with a 5015 fan on the print head and an additional auxiliary cooling fan on the side, all of which mean that printing fast and cooling quickly is all handled well. There are also a lot of other little touches with the Plus 4 that add up to a great experience overall, like the dampened glass door instead of the plastic moulded affair on the X Plus 3. The inside of the side panels are lined with an insulating foam which helps keep the heat in and to reduce sound. There's an extractor fan with a carbon filter too, which helps to drastically reduce the venting of nasty VOCs. I haven't actually tested this as yet because I don't have the right meter, but it's certainly less smelly when printing with things like ABS. The top panel is also glass, which gives it a very high quality feel. It's not hinged, but instead you completely remove it, which does save on the headroom you need, and it's not going to be flapping around while being propped open when you want better cooling. I also love the retractable handles on the top for lifting. Some of you may only use these once to lift the printer into place, but if you're going to move the printer around, then they're great for lifting safely. With the Plus 4, you get a reversible, flexible PEI build plate that uses a very simple but effective way to line the bed up squarely. As you're removing and replacing your bed pretty much every time you want to print something, it's important that this is as quick and easy as possible. Some 3D printer manufacturers seem to make this way too complicated, and you have to have 2 or 3 attempts at getting it right. The Bambu Lab A1 printers are especially annoying in this regard, but with the Qidi machine, I've got no complaints. I also like the filament feed tube routing and the cable chain that supports it. There's no rubbing or signs of any wear, even after months of use. There's a filament clog sensor where it feeds in and a runout sensor on the print head. These are all little things but add up to a reliable machine that has less print failures. When you're printing little toys in PLA, you don't need all of the sensors to catch your mistakes. You can just print the part again. However, when a failed print with expensive filament can make the difference between a job running a profit or not, they make a big difference. The Qidi Link app has also been improved, so monitoring your printer remotely is pretty easy, and when you're at the printer, the touchscreen display is of a high quality and very responsive. I've had Qidi machines before, but I have to say that I've never really liked the whole plastic white goods look too much. The X Plus 4 looks very different to Qidi's previous models, and I really like it. The outer panels are plastic, but painted in a metallic paint which makes it look and feel solid. So in the interest of stopping this video from getting too long, let's recap with some of the pros and cons before wrapping up. The highlights for me begin with just its supreme capability to do almost everything you could want from a 3D printer. It's difficult to find something that the X Plus 4 can't do. At the moment, it can't print with multiple filaments in one print without you doing manual changes, but there probably will be a point in the future where that will be an option if and when Qidi release their Qidi Box multi-material system. Where the X Plus 4 has the advantage over some other similar looking machines is with its chamber heater and large build volume. The only other 3D printer that rivals these features that I can think of is the Creality K2 Plus, but that machine is currently $500 more expensive without the CFS, which is Creality's multi-material system. Now, personally, I think the Creality flagship printers look a bit better, but we're not buying our printers to put them in a fashion show. For me, it's all about what it lets you do. The X Plus 4 is also right up there with the best when it comes to bed and nozzle temperatures. It's almost ready to go out of the box, and you get a very comprehensive clipper setup underneath a nice user interface. Usually, I love the machines with unmolested clipper setups because if the manufacturer doesn't add all the features that are available or they mess up a macro, I can go in and sort it out for myself. With the X Plus 4 though, I haven't needed to do any of that at all, and the machine is completely as Qidi intended. It has a good camera and light so that you can get time-lapse videos of your prints, and keeping an eye on what's happening is easy either with the Qidi Link app or just by typing the IP address into any web browser when you're on the same network. Probably my favourite thing that puts the X Plus 4 ahead of many of the other printers I've owned though is the print quality. Whether it's the wider belts, comprehensive print profiles, or some other special sauce, everything I've printed has been immaculate unless I did something to mess it up, like with the Mando helmet. And I've not even mentioned the speeds it can print. If you've never seen a Clipper-enabled Core XY 3D printer running, then the speed the X Plus 4 can print at will blow your mind. We've come a long way from the Ender 3 days, and these current machines are ridiculously fast now. The X Plus 4 matches pretty much anything else out there from Bambu Lab, Creality and Prusa with 20,000 mm/s squared accelerations and a maximum tool head speed of 600 mm/s. There are some areas that I feel need improving though. It is great to hear that the chamber heater board issue is now resolved for new customers, but there are a lot of people who would have been very disappointed with their purchase when they found out part of their printer could melt on them. Also, I've always found Qidi's customer support to be very good, and there are many instances of them sending out free upgrades to customers when an issue is found. What would be even better though would be if these problems were found before any machines reach the customer's hands. Even the stainless hot ends having to be replaced with ceramic ones is a frustration for someone who's just spent a significant amount of money on a machine like this. Qidi, please stop using your customers for product testing. Another negative that hasn't actually caused me a problem, but experience tells me it might, is some of the overstretched wiring in the back. If I get any kind of faults in the future, this is the first place I'll be looking. I hope lessons have been learned from the difficult birth of the X Plus 4, and anyone buying one today will be getting a great machine. It's just a shame that early customers had to pay the price for it. So to sum up, if you're serious about 3D printing and want to print more than toys and decorative parts, and don't want to spend over $1,000 for the privilege, then the X Plus 4 may be perfect for you. Remember to check out the links in the description for the best deals on a Qidi Plus 4 if you do decide to buy one. If you just want to print with PLA, want multicolour printing from the start, or you don't have the room the Plus 4 needs, then check out these other videos where I have recommendations for 3D printers that may be more suitable. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this extended review useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.